Live. Hello, everybody. Nice to see ya. Greetings, one and all, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. It's a pleasure to see you today. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is an episode of How to Rock Astrology. Today, in particular, we are going to be discussing the one and only nakshatra known as Mrigashira. Mrigashirsha, that is. I've got a picture of it here. Ooh, I'm making all the mess. Still getting used to how I want to flow through all these pictures and stuff, but this is the Nakshatra Mrigashirsha. Here we have a picture of the deity of Mrigashirsha known as SOMA. SOMA being the moon, Chandra in a lot of ways. And SOMA means nutrition. The symbol of the deer is related to Mrigashirsha. And as well, if you've been watching our Nakshatra story series, which is an extra part of this video, you can find out that there is a whole story involved with Brahma being Prajapati in the previous nakshatra, which is Rohini. Rohini is Brahma. It wants to procreate with its own daughter, which in a way is symbolized through Mrigashirsha. And then after Mrigashirsha, I believe we are going to have... I want to get this story right in my head because it is important. After Rohini, we have Mrigashirsha, and then we have Ardra, which is Shiva, who shoots the arrow of, I believe, Pushya at Brahma because it was trying to get at its own daughter. So there's a whole story there in the Nakshatra series. You'll find it eventually. I'm going to split this episode so that you can see these Vedic stories as a secondary video after this one. Today in particular, we're going to be mostly discussing the interpretive guidelines of planets falling into Mrigashirsha. What does it mean when you have any planets falling in there? Which planets do well? Most of this information is going to be coming from Vic Dicara in his Nakshatra, The Authentic Heart of Astrology. I highly recommend this book, not only because it gives you depictions of the nature of each nakshatra, but it also, and as well as interpretive guidelines for planets in there, but it also gives a full picture, a condensation. Vic almost makes his own sutra-like thing. Not really a sutra, but just he tells a story that ties the whole narrative of the nakshatras together. Very important. Finally, the last bit of our reading is going to come from this book, The Divine Forces of the Lunar Nakshatras as Portrayed in the Vedas, by an author known as Radhe. Whether that is a metaphor, Radha calling herself Radha, it's R-A-D-H-E, so it's not the same as Krishna's wife, Radha. But maybe there's some syntactic connection there. I'm not sure myself. As usual, folks, this is a live stream. I've got my friend RM hanging out here with me. It's nice to see you, RM, and everybody else who decides to join in. This is a live stream, so feel free to ask me questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. A lot of the times I try to focus pretty hard on the texts here because I'm kind of, in some ways, I really learn a lot about all these as I go. I've wanted to read these books in particular. I thought that I would go through it with you guys and learn it and teach it as I go. So that being said, explore with me in this series because that's what we're doing here. But I've been exploring the nakshatras for a long time, and I'm going to do my best to convey them in the way that they're conveyed in the Vedic text, in particular the Taitteriya Brahmana. And I'm going to try to talk about what I intuitively feel is the nature of the nakshatra. But I'm going to try to be discerning when this is me versus when this is coming from straight from the text. So I hope you guys have some fun with me and hang out here. Now, let's get started. We are going to discuss, I should bring this way back here. So I've got, a little bit of intro for each of these videos in this series. If you've been watching my Nakshatra series, you've probably seen a little bit of this intro. I am a tropical Vedic astrologer. In my practice, I use 12 tropical rashis or signs overlaid on the 27 starry sidereal nakshatras. So this is, kind of the classic 12-sign zodiac, tropically speaking, being merged with the 27 lunar nakshatras. Now, you can see more of my sidereal and tropical videos for more information on that. In particular, I've got a great video on Nadia Shah's channel about this particular subject. Now, this picture is an important piece of the understanding of tropical Vedic astrology. I'm just going to say really quickly here while I'm here. As a tropical Vedic astrologer, my understanding is that the nakshatras have an essence to them that are separate from what we know of as the 12-sign zodiac. They are completely distinct. The tropical people, in fact, say that the wheel of tropical astrology that makes Aries, for example, the point of Aries on March 21st is revolving backwards in the stars. This is called the precession of the equinox. I recommend you look it up. It's a very important concept in today's tropical sidereal debate. And it shows that the point of 0 degrees Aries is revolving in the 360-degree circle of the stars, revolving backwards, which means every 2,000 years or so, the sign that a planet is in is not necessarily going to correlate with the nakshatra that position was, let's say, 2,000 years ago, whatever it might be. Even probably less than that, actually. 2,000 years ago, if the sun was in Aries on March 21st at around 0 degrees Aries, that was considered to be in the nakshatra of Ashwini. Nowadays, the sun at 0 degrees Aries on March 21st in the year is in the sign of Uttara Bhadrapada, I believe. So it shows that tropical signs are revolving against the wheel of the nakshatras over thousands of years. And this is what this picture is intended to portray. There's an old story of the demon ego, a rakshasa, I believe would be the word, is a demon. And the demon was the ego. It was taking up all the space in the sky and in reality. The ego was too much. And of course, this is a metaphor for everybody's ego. Everybody needs to be humbled by Vishnu, who acts as the transcendental beingness that is beyond the ego's limited frame of experience. And Vishnu, as the arbiter of fate and karma and dharma, beyond the limited ego experience, Vishnu is involved in the mechanics of astral karma. So this is what this story is all about. What happens is the ego was getting too big. It was taking over the 3 lokas. And so the gods called on Vishnu, because that's always who they call on when there's trouble. And Vishnu says, okay, I'll fix it. I'm going to go to him disguised as a dwarf, and he's not going to think that I'm Vishnu. And I'm going to say to him, I want a boon. So Vishnu goes to the ego and says, I'd like a boon, please. And the ego says, what, you dwarf? What kind of boon do you want? And Vishnu says, nothing big. I just want 3 foot paces of land. And he was disguised as a dwarf, as a midget, as an atom. And the ego said, well, you are so small, your 3 little steps aren't going to mean anything. So you can have your 3 steps of land. It's going to be hardly anything for me. And Vishnu says, great, now I've got your word. The first step I take, I'm going to take the deep space of the stars. The second step I take, I'm going to take the local space of the tropical zodiac. And with my third step, where shall I place my foot? And the ego says, my lord, I can recognize that you are Vishnu. You can put your foot on my head. and that represents the horizon, the houses, the geomantic space of Earth spinning on its own axis. So the point that I bring this up is because these are three different astrological spaces, and they interchange with each other. They spin against each other. They change. Now, the whole point here is to consider that the stars of the nakshatras are different from the space of the zodiac. And as well, you know, generally speaking, this is the same thing for the classic Vedic people who are sidereal practitioners. But here in tropical astrology, because the tropical zodiac dial turns against the fixed nakshatras, one of the things I want to do on my channel here is discuss the nakshatras without any sign associations. This is very important because as we're going to explain, if we want to know the nature of the nakshatras, we have to extract it from what has historically been considered the association of the nakshatra with its signs. Again, as I said, 2,000 years ago, when the sidereal zodiac came to be, 0 degrees Aries was lined up with Ashwini. And this is what most Vedic people think, is that 0 degrees Aries and Ashwini are married together, which means if you have the sun at about 10 degrees of Aries, it will always have the symbolism of Ashwini, which means when we look back in history and try to learn about what Ashwini Nakshatra is all about, there's a bias because you'll always feel as if there's an integration of the symbols of Aries into Ashwini, but they are two different things. Now Ashwini falls into, I believe, Taurus in today's time. So this is why it's important for us to do a series like this, to talk about the nakshatras distinct from the signs. And that's what we're talking about here. My intention is to convey the pure essence or nature of the nakshatras as they are, without the sign, without the Rashi associations. Now, the most authentic and undistorted literature we have available on the nakshatras comes from the Taitteriya Brahmana. This is a commentary on the Krishna Yajurveda and is considered to be a continuation of it. So it's sort of a commentary on a Vedic era sutra, which is the Krishna Yajurveda, which is the actual Veda. And this commentary is considered to be an important part of that Veda. Now, I should note my sources here. Vic Dicara and Ernst Wilhelm are particularly big on the Taitteriya Brahmana, which is this particular commentary. It's a sutra that's a commentary that comes out of the body of the Krishna Yajurveda. So it's considered to be Vedic era. It's one of the only things that are really truly Vedic in terms of astrology. Natal horoscopes and the tropical zodiac came later, like 400 BC to about 200 AD. That's when it was beginning to form. Look up my Age of Aquarius videos. Age of Aquarius Debunked, if you want more information on that. But the nakshatras is something that goes much older than the zodiac because it's in the Krishna Yajurveda. And that's why Ernst Wilhelm and Vic Dicara and others are so concerned with getting the bones of the nakshatras here, because the nakshatras are described without association with the signs. Because this is a Vedic era text that was created before the zodiac came to be. So what is the nature of this distortion which the nakshatras have gone through? It's twofold. There's incorrect zodiac associations with the zodiac sign. And then B, there's associations with the Vimshottari Lord. It's the planet that rules the first dasha period when the moon falls in that nakshatra. I've got a little intro here, but I'm going to kind of give it short thrift. Vic Dicara has noted that we cannot assume nakshatras have the qualities of their Vimshottari ruling planets, because even the Vimshottari dashas are a system of astrology which was not created or considered when the nakshatras as a Vedic concept were conceived. Vimshottari is much newer. This is why we try to emphasize the Taitteriya Brahmana only, Now, what do we mean by this Vimshotri Lord? There could be useful information. It's called, people consider it to be the ancient ruler of the nakshatra. In this case, so people know what I'm talking about, Mrigashirsha is anciently considered by, again, when I say anciently, I don't mean this wasn't in the Taittiriya Brahmana. It's not that ancient. But when natal horoscope astrology was created, they thought that Mrigashirsha was kind of ruled by Mars. The reason is because if you were born with the moon in Mrigashirsha, the first dasha, you guys know about the Vimshotri dasha, yeah? The Mahadasha. The first Mahadasha you experience when the moon is in Mrigashirsha is Mars. So they thought Mars must have something to do with the character of Mrigashirsha. This is what we're trying to discern, because that's not necessarily the case. Especially when you read Vic's interpretation of things, Mrigashirsha doesn't exactly have that Mars quality to it. So this is why it's important to consider that we can't necessarily regard our interpretations based on these ancient rulers. It's better to go with what's strictly given in the Taittiriya Brahmana and this stricter symbolism. We especially don't want to treat these ancient ruler or the Vimshotri Lord as if the nakshatras were ruled by them, or as if it could express a planet's dignity in that nakshatra. So this is the example I always give. This is just to kind of give it short thrift. Let's say the sun is the first Mahadasha period when the moon falls in Kritika. So some say that some say that Kritika is ruled by the sun, because the sun is the first Mahadasha you experience when the natal moon falls in Kritika. But Kritika doesn't exactly have the vibe of the sun. For example, that would mean that Venus would not do well in Kritika, because Venus has the sun for an enemy. So some people assume Venus in Kritika must be in bad dignity, or it's unfavorable. But that's not the level of pure symbolism that Vic Dicara has suggested we operate on. You know, Kritika has the quality of Tikshna, which is sharp and dreadful. So a gentle planet like Jupiter in Kritika, even though Jupiter is a friend of the sun, or Jupiter has the sun for a friend, Jupiter doesn't do well in Kritika because Jupiter is a gentle planet and Kritika is a little bit too sharp for Jupiter. So we can't say Jupiter is good in Kritika just because Jupiter is friends with the sun. Same thing with Mrigashirsha. In Mrigashirsha's case, Mrigashirsha, when you have the natal moon in Mrigashirsha, Mars is the first Vimshotri planet. Just because Mars is that Vimshotri Lord doesn't necessarily mean that Mars or any of Mars's friends are going to do well in Mrigashirsha. To give it a quick peek here, gentle planets fare far better in Mrigashirsha than hard planets. So that's the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter do best in Mrigashirsha. Which you wouldn't, this is the point that I'm getting at, is that there is a difference, and this is part of what this series is looking to discern. So we also want to check out these classical nakshatra characteristics. These qualities are not given directly in the Taittiriya Brahmana, and they may have been culled by cultural intuitions and commentaries based on these two distortion points we've already mentioned. So we have to keep in mind that these four classical nakshatra characteristics are debatable. But I want to discuss them just to give us more of a framework for understanding what is happening. I want to discern what is good and what is not good from these classical associations. Now, in particular, Ernst Wilhelm has talked about the kingdom, the animal, plant, mineral association as being something useful to look at, and that's one of the reasons why I've been wanting to talk about it. So we are going to get to that, ladies and gentlemen. Now, before we do, let's first begin here now. My intro is over after 20 minutes. Maybe I should shorten these intros. I don't know. I think it's important to go through them. But hopefully you can see on YouTube where I slice the videos up. But now here we are going to actually start getting into Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. The first, of course, our main text that we're going to be reading from is the ancient source known as the Taitteriya Brahmana. We're going to get it from two different sources in particular. One of them is Nakshatra, the authentic heart of Vedic astrology by Vic Dicara. And the other one is Energies of the 27 Lunar Mansions. And this is a free PDF given out by Ernst Wilhelm, who is a very important patriarch of this modern reemergence of tropical Vedic astrology. So let's start getting into it here, folks. This is the Nakshatra Sutra from the Taitteriya Brahmana that is given for the nakshatra Mrigashirsha. Now, I'm supposed to, eventually, I'm going to make a little breakdown picture that describes how these sutras work, which is, you'll notice, this is a little picture that I got from Vic Dicara. As you can see, where it says Mrigashirsha, we have the original Sanskrit, and then we have the Roman alphabetized version of that Sanskrit. And then we have it a little bit clearer here. Now, Vic Dicara has color-coded each word in this sutra. There is a reason for this. Every time, this is how sutras work, is that they make an almost like a cerebral word melody. And you can always recognize the melody, like it's almost like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You can recognize that melody and even use different words, do it in different pitches, but you'll always recognize that structure of the melody. It's the same thing with the Taitteriya Brahmana Sutras, is that each word in its color coding is going to be the same for every nakshatra. So the pink word is the deity. So the pink word is the deity. The white word here is the name of the nakshatra, although, as in the case today, sometimes the author is going to use a different word to give slightly different information about that nakshatra. In this case, it's invaka, which, in my opinion, relates to invocation. We're going to talk about it once we get there. SOMA's invocation. And Vic Dicara tells us that the actual name Mrigashirsha is in the next nakshatra, interestingly. We're going to see why. But for now, we have the deity in pink. We have the name of the nakshatra, or information about the nakshatra, in white. Then we have the padastad, which is the foundation above, and the vastat, which is the foundation below. The yellow word, combined with the padastat, the gray word, this shows what's called the foundation from above. Metaphorically, what this sort of means is that this is something that this nakshatra needs. It's something that this nakshatra feeds on. And in particular, it's something that the native of this nakshatra feeds on in order to produce the result, which is given in blue. The yellow word is sort of like the fuel that this nakshatra needs, and the blue word is the result that can be expected when such a person, such a native, gets that fuel, and essentially when this nakshatra works well. When this nakshatra is healthy, it gets the yellow word, and it produces the blue word. When this nakshatra is not healthy, there is something obstructing the taking in of the yellow word, the padastat, which obstructs the production of the blue word, the Vastat word, which is Vayanto. And each nakshatra, just like any human, really, it wants to draw in what it needs, and then it wants to express what it wants to express. This is just like the soul. We need to receive as well as express. This is the moon, and this is the sun, in a certain metaphorical sort of way. So, hopefully you guys can see what I'm looking at here, eh? Yeah, good. This is our Taitteriya Brahmana Sutra. Mrigashirsha. Soma Syanvaka Vitatani Parastad Vayanto Avastat. I can't do it as poetically as Vic Dicara does, but this is how he would generally convey this nakshatra melody. Soma Syanvaka Vitatani Parastad Vayanto Avastat. And now we are going to start discussing what exactly is the breakdown of what this nakshatra means. So, what we read, this next bit is actually coming from, like I said, we're reading from two different texts today. This bit is going to be coming from Energies of the 27 Lunar Mansions by Ernst Wilhelm. This is the Nakshatra Sutras of the Taitteriya Brahmana from Ernst Wilhelm. And he gives his own little breakdown of what exactly this sutra is conveying. Although Ernst's is very bleached, very almost abstract, because he's purely trying to dig out the root essence of each word. Vic Dicara is going to put a little bit more flesh on it as we go along. I'm missing one particular important piece of paper that I'm going to have to get eventually. So, what we read is Somasya is of Soma, and this relates to the moon. It relates to nourishment, and it relates to a certain abundance that is given from the moon's sensitivity to what the soul needs. Soma is a true sense of nourishment in a way. So really, we can almost say that the invocation, the self-realization really of the moon, the diminutive, we're going to talk about how the diminutive pervadings, invaka, of Soma. It's interesting to think about. Invaka, so it's plural, and Ernst Wilhelm gives it to us as diminutive pervadings. Vic Dicara, as we're going to see, kind of describes what this word means as an entreaty. It's a sort of prayer, a melodic entreaty. And it goes to show at some level that there is a creation through communication with the self that is happening with Mrigashirsha. It's finding and exploring what the self is. And of course, these nakshatras are a psychedelic narrative of self-realization beyond just what each individual nakshatra represents. That's why it's important to go through this stuff as well. So, Soma, the moon, is the reflective self. And Soma's invaka, Soma's diminutive pervadings. It's narrowing down what the self experiences as the self. Now, in order for the self to narrow down what it is, it needs vitatani, which is extensions and diffusions, in order to create vayantaha, which is a sort of weaving. So this weaving is what is typically given with this nakshatra as the woven basket. What we have here is the extension of the self, the diffusions of the self, the exploration and experience of the self from the heartfelt place is what allows us to weave together with other people and essentially with ourselves. This is a very, in my opinion, a very tantric nakshatra. This is a nakshatra that abides by the idea of exploring what I am by weaving harmoniously with others whom I experience aesthetic, I would almost call it aesthetic erotic harmony with. Now, when I say erotic, I don't necessarily mean this to be of a passionate sexual nature. I mean erotic in the sense of eros. Some people like the feeling of silk. Some people would prefer something hard, metallic. Some people prefer even something with grip and with a roughness to it. There's no right answer for what gives you the sensual experience of feeling like you are at home with the sensations that an object provides. This is what we call aesthetic erotic choice. It's something that is just inside us all. There are things that you like, textures that you like, experiences that you like and don't like that are just inside you, that are quite inherent to you. And when we abide by those things which are home for us, for our soul, we are experiencing in some ways SOMA. We are experiencing self-realization. We are experiencing the joy inherent in the self. And we are, the diminutive pervadings of invaka is kind of, in my understanding, gripping what our experience of narrowing down what it is that we like. And in order to do it, we need to explore in a way. We need to express vititani, which is extensions, even diffusions, putting energy into going out there with people. So the diminutive pervadings of SOMA, the narrowing of the experience of the soul self, are diffusions from above, meaning experiencing the many varieties of what life is, adapting through the moon from above, and weaving and harmoniously pairing with things that are inherent with the self from below. That is the result. It's finding out what you are and weaving with what you are through the adaptation of the moon by diffusing yourself with other things. It's essentially how I would describe this as the fearless open path of the heart. This is, in a lot of ways, is a very important nakshatra discussing chitta. In yoga, we have the idea of chitta as the full spectrum of the mind. Sometimes we have a shadow of guilt, of victimization. I've done something in my past where I've been passionate about this thing, and I explored it with somebody, and there was part of me that felt like it was good and important, but it didn't work well with the other person, and so we feel embarrassed. And the moon needs to be able to adapt and not take that embarrassment personally. So this is why the diffusions of Vititani is kind of like us being discerning about the associations we've made, but still being willing to weave. It's by discerning what we are not, discerning the experiences that we've had, not identifying with the feelings associated with them, seeing ourselves as objective beyond it. This is when we develop into SOMA, into a faith that the intelligence of the soul knows what is good for us, and we start asking for it. We start thinking about it. We start wanting it. This is the true experience of SOMA. A lot of these nakshatras can be very deeply erotic in this sort of way. Now, this is Ernst Wilhelm's rather this is Ernst's abstraction of all of this stuff. Now we are going to be exploring what Vic Dicara gives regarding this nakshatra. This is Mrigashirsha. Now, these translations come from Vic Dicara's Nakshatras course on his website, and I highly recommend it. It's a very good, he's got a great a course that you can go through where he talks about all of the different nakshatras in this way. He really gets into the meat of it better than I do, better than anybody that I've seen. It's nice to see my friend Faux Show hanging out here and going through this nakshatra series with us. As usual, folks, this is a live stream, so always feel free to say hi. Now, what does this sutra mean in terms of what Vic Dicara gives? SOMA means liquid, nourishment, gentle, as well as the moon. Gentle is an important aspect of this because we have to be gentle in order to experience what SOMA, what the self, what the soul, the Jivatman is. We can't push to experience the soul. It's just like in Tantra. When you want to experience what is deeply the erotic nature that's inside yourself, you kind of need to let go of your grip on what you want your passion to be conveyed as. You have to relax into the experience of what your body wants. And it's the same thing in meditation. You can't push yourself to meditate. Well, you have to put in effort to devoting yourself to practicing meditation in a consistent way in order that you can create a groove where ultimately you can fall into the relaxation. Self-realization and meditation is just like music. When you see a musician and they go, and they really are just like, they can close their eyes and just be in that bliss and not even think about a single note that they're playing. Do you know how they got there? From practicing and practicing and practicing, and not only practicing, but enjoying their practicing. They gently follow the path of the passion that is already deeply inside them. And this is why SOMA is considered to be the moon, and it's gentle. You can only find what the self is by gently exploring it through self-realization. Now, Invaka. It's a song, a prayer, a tranquil entreaty. So it's almost, in order to be able to pray or to sing or to entreaty the true experience of the Jivatman, the self, to come through. I almost relate this word with invocation, this invaka. The invocation of SOMA, the invocation of the most natural self, requires vitatani, which is diffusions, in order to experience weavings. It needs diffusion. It needs to fearlessly let go of the mind's concepts, the mind's mental prison, the mind's memory of trauma and victimization again, and all these things that I don't know if that's me. I don't know if I like green eggs and ham. Sam I am. Green eggs and ham. Sam I am is this little Vedic questioner. It's neti neti. Are you sure you don't like green eggs and ham? Have you ever tried it? This is Vitatani is kind of like, the character in Green Eggs and Ham thinks that he doesn't like green eggs and ham. He identifies with that concept. And he has had a memory, even though he's never tried it, green eggs and ham. For some reason, he has a memory that stops him. He associates with not enjoying it. Sam I Am is the exploration of a diffusion from that identity. He is diffusing what he thought he was into the possibility of an adaptation, which is the moon, a gentle deer moving through and also blending with its surroundings, as we're going to talk about. Vic Dicara mentions that this diffusion has to do with blending into the surroundings around you, being very gentle, exploring and just going by feel on what feels good or what feels aligned with you. That's why Mrigashirsha natives are often, almost meek like a deer. Although, not necessarily, but they might enjoy the gentility of going, metaphorically going through the forest of their life and just enjoying everything, looking at everything for what it is, and allowing its experience of its environment to blend harmoniously by being open to the blending, by being open to the green eggs and ham that you thought you never liked, just being completely objective and open to the experience. So as we're going to find, Mrigashirsha here as Soma is this adaptation from the progenerative instinct of Prajalpati from the previous Nakshatra. Prajalpati is a more truly dire opening of creation, of the self, of exploring what the self is and what it could be. Mrigashirsha is gently adapting from and out of Rohini and Prajalpati. So this is kind of what's being, I guess I just wanted to say that. But this is my picture of what is happening here. The gentle moon's tranquil entreaty needs diffusions to weave together. So when the Mrigashirsha native begins to discover and narrow down what is in its inherent self, it begins to sing a song of exploring how it can blend with the people and with the things in its environment. And it's almost like a song. And this is why I think Vic Dicara describes it as a gentle entreaty. The entreaty of Soma is also going out to other people and to things in the world and saying, this is what I am and this is what I could blend as. And of course, this isn't just important for Mrigashirsha natives. It's important for all of us in understanding how the moon operates in a lot of ways. So that was an important aspect of our reading. Now let's dig a little bit farther. We've just discussed a lot about Mrigashirsha, about Soma, about how the moon operates, and about Chitta, which is very correlated in a lot of ways with the symbolism of Chandra, the moon, and Soma. Soma really technically is the experience of nourishment that comes from opening yourself to the full spectrum of feelings and experiences which Chitta pervades. Chitta is almost like the mind in a way, but it's not the same as Manas. There is a correlation, of course. Manas relates to the moon. It is our mind. It is our actual thoughts and experiences about reality. Even when we are antagonized by something, we don't like eggs and ham, Sam I am. I don't want to move towards that experience. That's an aspect of Manas. That's an aspect of the mind. Chitta is the secret reality that I actually do like green eggs and ham. I've just been traumatized by the Manas in the past to not associate with being open to green eggs and ham. Chitta is more correlated as the substrate of the true self beyond all mental constraints. And Soma is the nutrition, the opening to that delicious Chitta and being able to have green eggs and ham, because you couldn't before, but now you can. This is Soma. I feel very good about what I just described there. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you guys think, because I think that was a pretty cool way to put all that. Now, let's start digging into this nakshatra through Vic Dicara. This is Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology by Vic Dicara. We are going to be getting into Mrigashirsha, the gentle doe. Soma Sienvaka Vitatani Parastad Vayanto Avastat. It's the entreaty of gentility needs diffusion to weave. Now, before we start this, darn. I got to get one more piece of paper here, folks. I'm going to be right back. And then I got it right here. Yes. I thought I was going to have to go downstairs for it. This is another piece of this. I'm going to eventually add these little snippets to my video. Essentially what we read is Mrigashirsha is the doe. And the reason I like to bring this up is because Vic Dicara has given us a little piece of the total picture of the character of this nakshatra. Mrigashirsha, the doe, it represents dexterity, delicacy, timidity, and non-partisanship. Partisanship meaning two opposite poles. You're black and I'm white. You're Democratic and I'm Republican. Mrigashirsha brings all dualities together and sees the harmony and weaves harmony by still being able to be what it is, but exploring how what it is complemented by what others are. And it does it with dexterity, delicacy, and a bit of timidity. So we can see the how Vic Dicara kind of breaks these down is it talks about all the words in a little bit more detail. Then it gives a summary, and then we get into the interpretive stuff. So we've already talked quite a bit about a lot of this, but this is just going to give us more detail on the subject. The word soma itself literally means soft, gentle, fluid, and nourishing. Soma is the content within vegetables, which is ashuddha. And I have to stop there because we have to remember that there is a continuation in the story of the nakshatras and in the symbolism of the nakshatras. Remember Rohini, if you remember from our last video. In the sutra involving Rohini is that Rohini requires apaha, which is water, in order to produce what's called oshodayo, which are receptacles of light, known also as herbs and as well as vegetation. Oshuddha is vegetation, and it's herbs, and it's also a utility of sorts, because herbs can be conveyed as utility for specific things, nutriment for specific things, as well as vitality. Interestingly, Prajalpati's nakshatra Rohini, which is the previous nakshatra, it's the ox cart. It wants to provide nutrients for different people. It has its knowledge. Brahma, the previous nakshatra, is all about knowledge, the knowledge of Ayurveda, the knowledge of the universe, the knowledge of different herbs for different purposes, for different bodily constitutions. Because Brahma is creation. So where Rohini knows a lot about the many aspects of creation, Mrigashirsha is the process of adapting into knowledge that actually befits the self. Mrigashirsha builds off of Rohini in this way, because Soma, again, is the content within the herbs, the vegetables, the ashuddha, and Soma is what contains the vitality, the nutrition, and the flavor. Now, we learn in Ayurveda that certain vegetables, certain foods are going to work better for one person than they are for another person. If somebody is pitta, if somebody has too much heat in the body. Ginger, which creates heat, might not actually give them nutriment. It might not actually nurture them because they already have enough heat in their body. Ginger does very well for another person who's Vata, for example, like me. I'm Vata like crazy. And ginger helps to provide heat for a Vata person as well as a Kapha person. Ginger is also good for Kapha. So the nature of the nutriment comes from the individual needs of the person. It's the individual that is the dough of Mrigashirsha, of Soma. It's the gentle realization of what I am in order that I can use the vegetation, the knowledge of Rohini to my best advantage. This is Soma. Soma is the content within vegetables which contains the vitality, nutrition, and flavor. Now, there is a legendary elixir in Vedic reckoning called Soma, which is a superfood that nourishes life more powerfully than any other milk. Again, the word is also used as a name for the moon because moonlight is soft and gentle, and because the Vedic mind considered the moon to have a strong influence on liquids, and thus on the flavor and nourishment carried by fruits and vegetables. So the moon is very important to, again, self-realization in this way. It was a superfood, and in my opinion, that superfood resonates with what we're talking about in terms of Ayurveda, in terms of the needs, the inherent aesthetic erotic choice, and the constitution of the individual soul, as well as the individual genetic and bodily mainframe and ancestral carryings on from the previous incarnations and parents and etc. Soma is all of this stuff. It's the self. At least Soma being the richness, being this nutrient, it's when we can unbuckle the chitta from associations that obscure the reality of what we truly are. Then we get the nutriment of what we inherently are. Because if we are what we inherently are, we have all the nutrients we need. We have all the contentment that we need. We don't leak our energy into things that are useless. Now, the next word, of course, is invaka. And as I said, I kind of relate it to invocation. This sutra refers to Mrigashirsha with an unconventional name, right? Usually, like I said, in that aspect of our, in the white word here, usually it will show the name of the nakshatra. Sometimes the author of these Vedic sutras will use an enigmatic word in place of the name in order to give a little bit of extra information, because that's how sutras work. They want it to make it A, memorizable, and B, like kind of stand the test of time. So they want to insert as much meaning into each phrase, into each word as possible. So the sutra refers to Mrigashirsha as invaka. This word denotes a specific type of prayer, a gentle, melodic entreaty. This word highlights the gentle, tactful, delicate, and beautiful nature of Mrigashirsha. It's a song. It's a melodic, honey-toned song. The more common name of the nakshatra will be mentioned in the next sutra. That name, Mrigashirsha, means the head or face of a deer. And we're going to see that when you look at the Taitteriya Brahmana sutra for the next nakshatra, which is Ardra. It's of Shiva. Shiva is the one who destroys predators to protect prey. And the word for a predator is like a deer hunter. which is really a deer hunter. We're going to talk about it next in our next part of the sutra series, which is the nakshatra Ardra. The word that's used is Mrigavaya. Mrigayavaha. So it's a hunter of deer. And deers are gentle creatures who are just being themselves, who are easy, who are in tune with themselves, walking through the forest. A hunter of a gentle thing like a deer must be some kind of predator. And we're going to talk about that. It's a metaphor for the demons that obstruct us from exploring the green eggs and ham that we actually love. Maybe I shouldn't hold on to that metaphor too much, but it's working. It's doing the trick. I just don't want it to be too silly or whatever, but whatever it is that's stopping us from exploring a path of heart, that is the deer hunter, because the deer, the path of heart, is gentle with oneself. It forgives oneself. Any demon that demonizes the experience you've gone through in life, Shiva is going to destroy. So, the next word in our sutra is Vitatani. Vitatani parastat. This is the word that Mrigashirsha needs. Vitatani means diffusion, spreading and dissolving oneself to blend with others. Unlike solitary predators, deer diffuse their individuality into a herd, or they blend in with their surroundings. They diffuse their individuality into a herd or blend in with their surroundings. They are willing to become harmonically blended with whatever is around it. Vitatani, in its plural form, emphasizing that Mrigashirsha diffuses and blends into many other persons. Okay, sorry, I see. What this is saying is that Vitatani is in a plural form, which means it's diffusions. It needs to do lots of diffusions. And this emphasizes that Mrigashirsha diffuses and blends into many other persons, groups, and points of view, expanding to become a part of many other things, and embracing many viewpoints from many parties. This is partly why people say that Cancer in the moon relates to the masses. It relates to the individual self, but sometimes the self in one is the self in all. So Mrigashirsha is actually something that blends in many different ways when it's at its best, just like the moon. This whole nakshatra tells us a lot about the moon, about the jivatman, and about the self. The moon is adaptive. And we adapt with a healthy moon can adapt to many different things and still remain what it is. It's like Bruce Lee said about water. It can change into the shape of a kettle. It can change into the shape of a river. It can change into the shape of a teacup, but it always maintains the essential nature that it has inside of itself. And Mrigashirsha natives might find themselves having to explore this dimension of consciousness. You have to be able to diffuse yourself, or else you'll never discover the narrow gate of what you truly are. And you will never weave yourself into others, which is really the self and what it weaves itself into. The basket that is woven from our diffusions in the world around us is what Chitta knows to be ultimately the self that wants to come through. We don't necessarily need to hog ourselves internally in order to be enlightened any more than we need to. Mrigashirsha can become too much of a chameleon, lending itself too much, and that's why boundaries are important for a Mrigashirsha native. Mercury is very important for anyone who has Mrigashirsha placements, because Mercury allows you to communicate and develop boundaries playfully so that you can A, be playful about your exploring green eggs and ham, and B, when you don't like green eggs and ham, you tell Sam I am to go away. When you don't like what you're diffusing with, you have to be able to speak to that too. So, Somasya Invaka, Vitatani Parastat, diffusions are needed in order to produce Vayanto Avastat. So the root word for Vayanto is Vayanta. So what is Vayanta? Vayanta means to weave, braid, pair, and couple. The sutra uses the word in dual case, stressing Mrigashirsha's desire to weave two parties into one. Coupling has a sexual connotation, showing Mrigashirsha as an attractive nakshatra with great beauty in its supple, sweet, and gentle nature. And this does show, again, more in the theme of what I would call aesthetic erotic choice, where if you blend with something well, this is almost a nakshatra that can convey the nature of whatever your inherent emotional needs are connected with your passions and your sexuality. It can be understood through the language of like kinksters, where we're talking about like sub and dom sort of modalities, where if you are a submissive person and you like to have there's an emotional feeling of understanding, self-realization that comes when you allow yourself to be submissive to somebody who can be more dominant, or vice versa. If you want to explore being a more dominant person to someone who is willing to be submissive, gently exploring these attitudes is the kind of coupling, the kind of weaving that can happen, which can bring the self-realization of that thing which you want to be. Many of these nakshatras you'll find have an instinctive and inherent erotic quality to them. And this is what I mean by aesthetic erotic choice. Again, I'm leading more by eros than anything. Eros rather than like sex, this is we're talking about the moon here, and the moon has an aspect of sex to it, but sex is an adjunct to the soul, not the other way around. There are other nakshatras that are more typically about sex, and exploring sex for its own sake. Mrigashirsha is exploring the soul and what dimensions of sex play a part. Really, it's more about passion and sensuality and interconnected relationships that will bring out aspects of your emotional reality that you almost can't control, that you really are. Ultimately, it's taking a gentle stance towards what might be coming through you when it comes to the erotic. And as well, again, just feeling out texture, feeling out what feels good in people through what feels good in yourself. These are the kind of weavings that happen, and it can be a friendship-based. It's a sense of love. It's a sense of shared kinship in the soul with those with whom you blend in this way. My friends RM and Varun Rawat seem to be enjoying the show. I'm glad to be seeing you guys still hanging out with me here. So, in summary, with a desire to benefit and nourish others, which is SOMA, as well as the self, Mrigashirsha mixes with many disparate parties, Vitatani, making attractive and gentle entreaties, Invaka, to create unity among them by weaving their diverse viewpoints into a cooperative unit, which is Vayanto. So Vic Dicara is giving us a very specific rendition of what we see with Mrigashirsha here. What we see is that the gentle doe, by exploring its enjoyment of what it finds with itself, it can explore and diffuse through its open-hearted, fearless exploration. It finds interconnections between various points of view and various realities of experience, and can weave their diverse viewpoints into a cooperative unit. And this is Vayanto. This is the weaving. This is the Mrigashirsha being a vessel for the adaptation that the moon represents at a collective level. And of course, the individual Mrigashirsha native has to experience themselves moving through that connection. They are, they're a fulcrum. They're a jointer for these many diffuse areas of connection. So, we've kind of talked a little bit, or quite a bit at this point, about the Mrigashirsha native, or the sutra, I should say, of Mrigashirsha. Now let's start to get a little bit into what we can expect from interpreting how planets, not just the moon, but how planets falling into Mrigashirsha should be considered and conveyed. What we read is that Mrigashirsha is highly desirable for creating unity, peace, and partnership. But when situations demand stern and direct confrontation, Mrigashirsha is weak. What we've already read is that Mrigashirsha can be timid. So, since Mrigashirsha depends on being diffuse, its weak point is in firm commitments and clear allegiances. But its strong point is in mutability and diplomacy. By openly experiencing fearlessly those things that it is called to diffuse, to become diffused into, and to exploring and becoming at some level, not necessarily, it's funny how we would say this, but it becomes identified with the things that's what we mean by diffusion, diffusing something. It's splitting it up into different things. And those different things, ideally, are, again, like the green eggs and ham. Those diffusions are something that the person ultimately had in their soul, that they wanted to become diffused into. Although, by doing so, you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. You're going to be diffused into things that you don't necessarily identify with in order to be the explorative, gentle, self-explorative person that Mrigashirsha represents. That being said, it depends on this diffusion, which means it can be tough to hold firm commitments and clear allegiances because it wants to see and blend with all the things that it has become associated with. And by trying to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody, especially with masculine, hard planets. With the exception of Jupiter. Really, it's more about gentle planets. Gentle planets do well here. Harder planets don't do as well. Gentle planets, this includes the Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter, being sort of diplomatic and mutable, playful, listening to other points of view while also, again, being like water, not letting go of your own essential nature. Is the thing about Mrigashirsha is that it can read into many points of view and allegiances and styles and viewpoints, find a bottom of some level of deepest allegiance, but it'll never let go of its allegiance with everything, but it will be able to say that I think this team is right about this and that this team should consider this in a different way, etc. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about that there. It can be mutable and diplomatic and speak to the individual places that it has allegiance to, ideally, while also not alienating them completely. This is like somebody who, friends tell friends that they got a piece of spinach stuck in their teeth. But they'll do it in a way that doesn't necessarily harm them or harm the allegiance. Mrigashirsha can do this. You have to consider, my friend, that if you want to be a part of this collective, this thing that you do, I love, but it is not conducive to what everybody's going for here. This is like a gentle planet in Mrigashirsha, is that it can gently entreaty the seductive desire to come into alignment with the group, communal, collective intention. When you have Mars or Saturn or the Sun here, or possibly even the malefic moon, malefic Mercury, what happens is that it becomes, it's like a pointed way of becoming a melting pot, telling everybody how to abide in the collective in a hard way, or possibly just not saying anything at all, not doing it seductively, not being playful, not inviting the person to playfully blend with the collective, but just essentially, if you've got Mars here, if you've got any of these hard planets here, you'll probably begin to have antagonism towards what Mrigashirsha is, which is being willing to diffuse, willing to blend in a harmonious way. You'll feel antagonized by that because you've done it in the past, but you were too hard on it because of that hard planet, and then you begin to not even use that hard planet. That's kind of how we would typically think about these sorts of things. So, gentle planets like Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter fare far better in Mrigashirsha than others. Stern and tough planets indicate inability to be appropriately stern or gentle. Right? When Mrigashirsha functions well, it indicates the ability to meditate, form partnerships. When Mrigashirsha functions well, it indicates the ability to mediate, to form partnerships, to hold teams together, and to create unity by a sort of soul association with the groups that are being developed. When Mrigashirsha malfunctions, and before I should say it's a healthy identification, because Shiva is beyond all the different identifications. But there are times when things happen in life that we are identified with that can be healthy for the soul. It's just always good to be objective about how much you identify with anything in external reality, because nothing lasts but the soul. But that being said, when it functions well, there is an ability to mediate, form partnerships, and create unity through a heartfelt devotion to what's coming through, an identification with it in the soul. When Mrigashirsha malfunctions, it indicates being non-committal, scattered, and afraid to stand up for oneself and what one believes in. Especially the scatterment becomes, I don't know what I identify with. I feel like I want to push in a hard way to explore how I identify with many of these things. And it becomes so pushy that you don't sit back and digest and become ultimately nurtured by the soul's connection to those things that you're being diffused into. Hard planets are not gentle about the diffusion. And that's the problem, is they either don't get to diffuse properly because people find the energy aggressive, and then they internalize and are antagonized by diffusion in the first place. Or number two, they become antagonized by the hard qualities that that masculine planet's supposed to represent. You know, if you got Mars here, it would be, you would begin to be antagonized by what Mars represents, by house, by sign, by whatever Mars is holding. Those planets would have a hard time gripping firmly what Mars is supposed to be doing, because it has been scattered in this way and antagonized by its own masculine energy. I hope that makes sense. Now, there is a life lesson we can get from this sutra. This sutra addresses the perennial question: how can we be broad and multifaceted in life and love without being scattered, timid, and non-committal? How can we be multifaceted in life and love without becoming scattered, timid, and non-committal? Being broad and diffuse seems to require a lack of passionate, decisive loyalty to any single person, party, or school of thought. But without such dedication, how do we progress very far in any particular direction? This is what Mrigashirsha gone bad tends to feel. I'm too diffuse. I can't go anywhere with any particular thing. The solution suggested by this sutra is to use broadness, vitatani, to strengthen one's core focus, vayanta, not as a distraction from it. Keep a core commitment to an individual, a point of view, a belief, etc. Be like water. Don't diffuse your essential nature when you become diffused. But use the diversity of many different points of view to add to and strengthen that core commitment. Very good. Vic Dicara, everybody. That's so good. In a relationship, for example, one can use the inspiration of the sexiness, beauty, and desirability one finds in diverse places to strengthen and enhance the sexiness, beauty, and desirability in their core committed relationship. One can, the nature of the body, if you're gentle with it, you'll see that it is an erotic, magnetic mechanism that can see much sexiness in many things. You watch a movie and something goes on, something plays out in your head. And if you're gentle with it, you won't be embarrassed by that. You won't be antagonized by the natural erotic thoughts that you're having. You'll just experience them openly, plainly, and clearly. And you can use this, again, if the Mrigashirsha in you is working well, you can explore what your consciousness brings up and add it to the core commitment you have with the relationship or the relationships that matter. In intellectual matters, one can use the findings of many different disciplines and researchers to increase one's understanding of one's core primary topic of study. A braid is much stronger than the individual hairs in a bunch. A rope or cloth is much stronger than the individual threads that make it. Thus, Mrigashirsha, though a fundamentally meek and humble nakshatra, achieves great strength, especially when it is combined with the love and passion of others. Beautiful. Again, that's Vic Dicara, everybody. What a beauty. I think that that's just a great depiction of everything we've said here. Now, in every reading, Vic Dicara gives us a supplication, a sort of his own poetic rendering of how we can draw the influence of Mrigashirsha Nakshatra and SOMA into our lives. Supplication. Mrigashirsha draws King SOMA. This auspicious nakshatra is his beloved abode. This causes many types of people to respect him It grants fertility to those who strive for it. Wherever this nakshatra, Mrigashirsha, is, devotion abounds, and the king falls in love with beloveds. They nourish him with affection. This brings peace and agreement to the two-footed and the four-footed. This brings peace and agreement, as I would say. I would translate that somewhat to the two-footed being the higher chakras of the spiritual cerebral aspect of the self, and the four-footed, which is the lower animal aspects of the self. Even there's a spiritual metaphor that I think I'm reading here, where the two aspects of the animal self and the higher self are being entreated into the singular SOMA experience by coming together in a shared, aesthetically harmonious life. It's a very interesting, deep depiction of what the moon is doing, which is adapting and bringing all the diverse, diffuse aspects of the self together into the one great king Soma that is fully self-realized, especially able to meditate and have the energy and nourishment to truly continue meditating. So the sun is kind of the dharma of meditation and single-pointed focus. King Soma, the moon, is the Soma. It's the energy that we get from gently opening to what we inherently are and the end game of what we inherently seek to be in our self-realization journey. Wonderful stuff. I almost can't believe it. It's so good when I read it. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was a lot to describe there. One thing left to read here, folks. Next up, the final part of our reading today, we're going to be discussing from the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras, as portrayed in the Vedas. We are going to be discussing the native. And you can, check out the video that I've got here on Mrigashirsha Nakshatra in the Vedas to give a little bit more backdrop on Soma as a deity of Mrigashirsha. Now we're talking about the native. We're talking about how does the qualities that we've learned about Soma as a deity play in the character of somebody who has the moon in Mrigashirsha Nakshatra or who has any important emphasis of planets in Mrigashirsha. We read that Jyotisha Shastra classifies Mrigashirsha as a divine, a deva nakshatra, of a soft or tender mridu quality. In the stellar space of Mrigashirsha, Prajalpati, which is the deity of Brahma, who rules Rohini, which is the nakshatra that came just before Mrigashirsha. In the stellar space of Mrigashirsha, Prajalpati Brahma transforms into a stag and pursues his own daughter. Pierced by Rudra's arrow, Prajalpati's head flies up and lands in that space of the sky, occupied by the stars of Mrigashirsha. Hence, the stellar configuration of this nakshatra is in the form of a deer's head. So it's Prajalpati's head. Interesting. This is also suggested by its name. Mrigashirsha means the head of a deer or antelope. Importantly, it is the head of a male deer. Got it. It's a stag. Okay. So it's Prajalpati's head that is there. So thus many facets of the native are gleaned from the nature and behavior of stags and secondarily deer. So there is a passion, there is a sort of, not aggression, although I'm going to see what we're going to read here, but there is a one-pointedness towards experiencing that which is inside the self as the moon, as the Jivatman. And the meek, gentle quality of the deer is considered secondary to this author, which is interesting. So let's read about what is said here. A mature stag is recognized by its full-grown set of antlers, a process that begins slowly and requires repeated shedding until their final shape is cast. In similar fashion, time is required for the native of Mrigashirsha to reach full maturity, and the process will no doubt involve a series of trials and tribulations. Once fully matured, the native is at last viewed by others as a leader of the herd, of their own herd. And of course, becoming a leader means you must go through the transfusions, the diffusions of being in the herd that you identify with internally. Indeed, Soma Raj is a handful of Nakshatra Devatas. King Soma, Soma Raj, the deity of Mrigashirsha, is among a handful of Nakshatra Devatas deserving of the title of king. Other Devatas include Indra, Varuna, and Yama in particular. But we read of Soma Raj that he is the king of Brahmins. That comes from the Shatapatha Brahmana. And he's also known as the king of the plant kingdom in Mandala 10 of the Rig Veda. Now, central to the elaborate Soma Yagna ceremony, which is a key sacrificial rite, all the yagnas, the Vedic yagnas, are considered to be the divine Vedic rite that symbolizes everything going on in the nakshatras. Even the way that the Vedic ceremony is laid out, it's a ceremony that takes a year to prepare, and there's deep intentions laid out in a sacrificial, devotional way throughout the year leading up to this ceremony. The Vedic yagna is the key to understanding what the nakshatras are. And the Soma Yagna particularly relates to what Soma is in the Vedic mind. And so that's why when we read about the ceremony, we get a glimpse of what Soma is and what it represents to the Vedic mind. So central to the elaborate Soma Yagna ceremony is the symbolic rebirth, the initiation of the Yajamana into manhood, and that is the person going through the Vedic ceremony, the Vedic sacrifice ceremony. They're experiencing a death and rebirth, an initiation in this ceremony. Hence the transition of Mrigashirsha natives, the person with the moon in Mrigashirsha, their transition into adulthood is typically the grand finale of a particular accomplishment, feat, or event. So that is almost like some great accomplishment from Mrigashirsha natives. They will make some big accomplishment in their lives. And this will signify for them a feeling of coming into the initiation, into rebirth, into life, into manhood or womanhood in a true sense. These transitional stages would be important for Mrigashirsha natives. Now, Soma is the portal through which priests and men transcend everyday reality. Soma is very important, as we've just read in our series talking about Soma as a deity. Not surprisingly, This native of Mrigashirsha displays a great fascination for altered states of consciousness and will often leverage external substances to induce such states. It's interesting to see how somebody might have positive planets here and experience perhaps some strength in the world of psychedelics or altered states of any sort, not necessarily just through the imbibing of substances, such as meditation, psychedelic forms of yoga and pranayama, etc., even tantra. In charts suggesting a natural proclivity towards spirituality, an exploration of alternative realities opens the door to higher truths of self-realization. However, if Mrigashirsha Nakshatra is gravely afflicted, such practices can become little more than a means of self-medication and possibly even self-distraction and self-destruction. Now, I just want to read this for a moment. Now, in charts suggesting more worldly involvement, there is an unquenchable thirst for pursuing the many pleasures of life. Recall that prinana, which means making the world more enjoyable or pleasing, is the Shakti of Mrigashirsha. So the Shakti of Mrigashirsha is all about making the world more tolerable, making us able to experience it in a more tolerable way, to bring joy from what is inside of the self. And the experience of joy, the experience of the bliss of what one is, of Ananda, is depicted as being central to what SOMA is, which is very deep, something super psychedelic going on there. But in particular for Mrigashirsha natives, the concept of self-enjoyment, of enjoying life, becomes, enjoying life through being what you inherently are and enjoying what you inherently are is a big important theme that can either launch them towards success or drag them down towards failure. Now, unfortunately, this author sometimes describes the character of these nakshatras through the ancient idea that the nakshatra in the sign has a shared resonance, as a shared symbology. They are talking now in this part about what happens when planets are in Taurus versus planets when are in Gemini. In today's day and age, Mrigashirsha does not fall into Taurus, so that's why I'm going to ignore those bits. Now, ultimately, pleasure-seeking and sensory indulgences are compelling forces in the life of Mrigashirsha natives. We recall that Prajapati pursues his own daughter, Usas, and Soma gets hot and bothered over Tara, the wife of another god, and it causes disruption in the divine pantheon. Soma can't help but get super hot and bothered about somebody named Tara, who is the wife of Brihaspati, who's a sage. And Brihaspati, just is sage-like and is kind of unaffected by it internally. But the sage knows that it's technically wrong. And so that's why all the gods scramble at that moment to figure out how we got to deal with the fact that Soma just stole an important sage's wife. Because Soma gets lost to the musk of its own enjoyment. In these legends, desire supersedes principles of right and wrong. Thus, the Mrigashirsha native can assertively seek after what they desire, despite known repercussions. It's gently listening to the taboo desires and enjoyments that are born inside the heart and soul. We want to do it fearlessly, but we don't we still have to have our spiritual wits about us. We still want to abide by Ganesha, Ganapatye, which is a combination of intuition, our intellect, which I believe would be Ga, with Na, which is wisdom. It might be the other way, actually. That would make sense. I believe that Ga is wisdom, a universal wisdom, and then Na, like Narada, is a self-realized wisdom of how wisdom applies to us, including all these dark parts of the mind that involve our desires. When we abide by Ganesha, we can oversee the little mouse of the mind through the Ga of wisdom, Ganeshwara, right? So this is why it's important for someone with Mrigashirsha to explore what's inside them, to explore their desires openly without fear, but also abide by universal wisdom. Now, prevalent themes in the life of this native may include seduction, abduction, and even stalking, especially if it kind of goes bad. And this sort of, again, there is a lot of the times the nakshatras can abide by a sense of the nakshatras are morally ambiguous in the sense that the nature of nature is conveyed through the nakshatras in a very strong way. Mrigashirsha, having been abducted by its own father, and this incestuous element of that story, goes to show at some level that there is the capacity for a Mrigashirsha native to experience a desire to explore taboos, and especially sexual taboos related to kink, and to the sexual phases of submissive versus dominant, and all the sort of kinky playouts that can happen between an alpha and a beta, a pusher and a receiver, and the vice versa of those things. In my opinion, such things can be done safely, communicated effectively, if we don't take them as a taboo that is unable to be explored with mindful purpose. We should be open to whatever is inside of our hearts and explore them with meditative mind, so that not only do we not get attached to them, but they don't become an unconscious shadow where we chew the cud of wondering about those unexplored desires in our deepest moments of meditation, and it fogs us because we have not allowed ourselves to explore it. That being said, it's important for this type of person to meditate on the nature of the eternal self, which is beyond these phases of the mind. The sun, the Atman, which is beyond this astral karma of a person who wants to explore these kinks and other such things. Just because you're beyond it, Shiva is beyond it, doesn't mean you can't explore it. But just because you explore it doesn't mean you need to identify with it at the deepest sense. It's objectivity is what's going on here. I digress. Look to the tenure of the chart and the nature of the Mrigashirsha's planet. So whatever planets or whatever's going on in Mrigashirsha, to determine if the native's deep-seated urges are within the realm of decency and aligned with universal principles. If influenced by multiple malefics, the native may spend a lifetime trapped in a vicious cycle of never-ending cravings that would be difficult to get out of. Now, this would probably happen especially if you have either a planet there or a difficultly placed planet in the chart. If the sign is not well, if you've got a hard planet there, especially Mars, Saturn, or the Sun, the malefic Moon, malefic Mercury, and if those planets are not well supported generally in the chart, this is when these kinds of afflictions can happen. It's like you never get enough of the craving represented by Mrigashirsha. You never feel fully like you're enjoying the bliss, the ananda that is talked about in the Vedas and etc. Until you start to meditate. That'll be my final word in my own train of thought there. Now, Buddha, Mercury, is born from Soma's affair with Tara and is later adopted by Brihaspati, who is Tara's original husband. Hence, on the familial side, out of wedlock pregnancies and or adoption may be in order for those with afflictions to Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. As for social habits, I should say, my friend Reshma, I'm glad to be having you here. You have Venus in Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. Very interesting. And I hope that this story has been giving you some elucidation on what Mrigashirsha is all about. Now, as for social habits, a stag is known for its preference of traveling alone. Hence the proverb going stag, meaning without a partner at a social gathering, a stag party. Alternatively, the stag may elect to travel in a small band of fellow stags during the non-mating season. In either case, time away from the hustle and bustle of crowds is a must-have for the Mrigashirsha native. Often, just a handful of deep, close friends is all that the Mrigashirsha native requires for companionship. Now, Soma's dearest companion is Indra, who is dependent on the Soma draft for strength and courage. Without beloved Soma, Indra is but an ordinary god. Somewhere in the life of the native there is an Indra, one who is likely dependent upon the Mrigashirsha native, and probably derives great courage and fortitude from him. To determine who that person might be, look to the house placement or rulership of the planet that is in Mrigashirsha. For example, if the 10th Bhavabhavesha, the 10th Lord, is in Mrigashirsha, like let's say if you're a Cancer rising, Aries is the 10th house of Cancer, the 10th Bhavesha. So if Mars falls into Mrigashirsha, then that's the 10th Lord falling into Mrigashirsha. In such a case, it might be possible that the Indra in your life might be a boss or a superior at work. If the 3rd house lord falls into Mrigashirsha, it's more likely a sibling. If the 5th lord falls into Mrigashirsha, look for a child or a student to fill this role of an Indra who depends on you, or on whom you depend in certain ways to be given courage and fortitude in a mutual way. Very interesting. Now, it's worth noting that Soma, along with Agni, is the foremost god of the Vedic ritual, of the Vedic sacrificial yajnas. So thus the native may display an interest in spiritual or societal rites and rituals. Now, finally, a discussion of the native's life would be lacking without an inquiry into the impact of Soma's brutal and theatrical death. This is part of what we've read in the video that I've done where I talk about Soma here, the Soma deity of Mrigashirsha. What was described is that during the ceremony, the Soma Yagna ceremony, the Soma stalk, the plant that it holds soma inside it is beaten and chopped up and squeezed in order to get the juice out. In the same way, what appears as ordinary green stalks on the outside of the soma plant are ruthlessly beaten with stones in order to extract the rare and precious red soma juice. Without a doubt, soma is the sole sacrificial substance worth more than its weight in gold. So similarly, residing within the depths of the Mrigashirsha native is a rare and valuable gem, a priceless ruby waiting to be unearthed. Perhaps that ruby is an unusual talent or rare knowledge. Perhaps it is their life's calling that is deep somewhere inside them. Extraction of this ruby is no simple feat. Repeated thrashings from a teacher, a mentor, or a guru, or some kind of repetitive life lesson leads to the discovery of this gemstone inside the soul of whatever it is. Only then, when beholding such marvel, is the ceaseless need for pleasure at last satiated. It is at that moment that the true ecstasy and life-intoxicating soma is experienced. Whatever is the true meaning and purpose inside the self has to go through some kind of tapas, some kind of fire of Agni, some kind of sort of initiation, some kind of sacrifice ceremony. Something must be sacrificed in you in order to finally be freed from the sensate desires of meaningless sensual cravings and to be put into a purposefulness that aligns with the self, that gives joy for what the nature of the joy inside the self inherently has been throughout the whole life of the person. And that is when soma is experienced at its best. It's a metaphor for everybody. It's particularly a poignant metaphor for the Mrigashirsha native. So, that would be it. This is all, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that everybody has enjoyed this reading and this rendering today. I'm Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this. I hope the interpretations have been good. I hope that the character of soma that we've described can give you a peace and an understanding of what Mrigashirsha Nakshatra natives are all about. I'm Dustin Cormier. Thanks again for doing this with me. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment, and I'll do my best to comment back. Keep your eyes peeled because we've got more stuff happening. I'm going to start doing this Thursdays as well as Sundays whenever I can. So hang out with me because we've got more to come, folks. Thanks so much for watching. And thanks to Reshma Narain Sami for hanging out with me and being a part